Welcome, welcome all of you brave souls showing up in yet another Zoom room. But let's all know that we're in this virtual room together, and we're all here to learn about ESG impact reporting and corporate transparency. We have two experts in the field, two folks that are really making this happen in their respective worlds with impact, with thousands of employees and an infrastructure and ecosystem of companies. So you are at the right place at the right time. My name is Glenna Wiseman. On behalf of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability, we welcome you to this call on ESG reporting. We thank also our sponsors for this event, Enphase Energy and Olivine. So thank you all for being here with us. Please use the chat. You all know how to do this, and introduce yourself with your LinkedIn profile if you are open to getting a bunch of requests for new friends. Next slide, please. All right, so we are going to move here with our next slide. Just a quick look at our discussion agenda today. We really have a wonderful opportunity to talk with our panelists, to do some Q&A. We're then going to take questions for the audience. Even though I have a bunch of questions, I promise I will share. Then we will do a thank you and a wrap up. Next slide. All right, if you possibly, I can't even imagine that you don't know who Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability is, but we are celebrating 10 years this year. We are an influential network of professionals furthering the roles of women into the growing green economy and making a positive impact on the environment. And we sure as heck look forward to doing some in-person events in 2022. How about you all? Are you ready for that? Yes. Okay, next slide, please. So you all know the Zoom etiquette. If you can be on camera, that is great. That helps us to feel like we're all in the room together. If you're asking questions, we absolutely know that you'll put forward your best foot in terms of a good, solid question that is honoring of everyone's time. And please, the most important thing is to share your LinkedIn profile, say hello, comment. Chat has become such a great place for resources. So if you have a link, if you've got a great ESG related resource, add it to chat. Next slide, please. All right, my name is Glenna Wiseman. I'm in the clean energy field, particularly utility scale solar now, and that is my pre-COVID hair. So again, a thank you to Enphase and Olivine. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to take in just a few seconds a 17-year whirlwind look at ESG. And the roots of ESG happened in 2004 when the then United Nations Secretary General, and this is applicable since we're going into COP26 here, and the United Nations has a lot going on with this, but the Secretary General at that point wrote a letter to 55 CEOs of the world's leading financial institutions. And he invited them to become involved in an initiative that would bridge money, the investment world, and important initiatives around environment, social, and governance issues. So one letter started the ball rolling. Next slide. That has evolved into a reporting structure under 3 buckets for environment, social, and governance criteria. And a point here is that there is no one exhaustive list. Just to challenge our panelists and all the people involved with this, there's not one list. Next slide. And there's not one reporting platform or criteria or framework. There's a lot of them, and they're not standardized. So this is, in my view, a little bit like the Wild West of reporting structure, but it is evolving, and it's evolving quickly. So I think our insights that we're going to get today will help. How much money is involved? Let's go to the next slide. A growing amount of companies who are using ESG criteria and asset investment portfolios that are looking at ESG. I can get my mouth to work, I'm sure. Asset companies. So look at if you go from 2012 over to 2025, you're looking at a growing number of investment portfolio companies involving those assets that have ESG ratings. And if I said any of that wrong, my panelists are going to help me figure this out. Next slide. And how much money is involved? A lot of money. A lot of money is involved. So projected assets under management with a focus on ESG. In other words, those companies that are reporting ESG criteria and scores and operational risks related to climate, social, or governance issues, as by 2025 is going to reach 53 trillion. This is sources Ernst & Young. So this is it's at 37.8 trillion right now. So this is a very big topic that we're going to unscramble here a little bit today. So next slide. And I have two fabulous guests. Andra Anderson is the Senior Director of Workplace Operations for Sony PlayStation, and Jennifer Boynton, Jen, is a Senior Manager of Corporate Responsibility at Stryker. And so what I've asked them to do is to think about their backgrounds as it relates to sustainability and ESG reporting, and tell us their background themselves with threading that particular experience in. So we can bring the slides down, and we'll start at the top of the alphabet with Andra. Andra?
Hi, I'm Andrea Anderson, and I'm at Sony PlayStation. I've actually been at Sony for over 30 years, and I have recently learned about ESG. Starting in 2019, I was tasked with obtaining an ISO 14001 certification for one of my sites. We have a 400,000 square foot site that holds 1,200 people. So during that journey, I also had to create an environmental health and safety program and sustainability processes and procedures. And I had never had any experience in that field before. And it was very much a confusing thing for me, because I didn't understand how both health and safety and sustainability work together. And so it was tough to try to figure it out. And I had to do this all within a year. So as I was learning about these two processes, I tried to learn wherever I could. And I went to a climate reality training with former Vice President Al Gore. And in that, it really changed my life. It showed me how all the pieces fit together. And I really was able to see how, things that I thought were kind of boring and dry, like environmental health and safety, actually fit in to sustainability, and that the laws and requirements were all set up to save not only the planet, the people that live on the planet. You have health and safety policies against chemicals. Well, that helps save the people and the planet. And so I started to see how things were interrelated. And I really started to understand how everything was interrelated. And it became a passion for me, so much so that I and one other gentleman that I work with presented to our deputy president the concept of having ESG at our company in 2020. And we just got a communication yesterday that we have a new ESG department with an ESG steering committee, and I'll be transferring into that group next month. So it's very exciting for me, and it's something that I had never known anything about, but have lots of personal sort of experiences in my learning experience on it, and we'll be learning more. Now I'm getting into the more of the reportings and the sort of educational process of that, which is a lot. But we actually have taken our company and things like diversion rates. We're up to, I think, 85% diversion rate at our company. We just did a sustainable decommissioning project where we diverted 95% of materials from the landfill and saved the company almost $500,000. And we've been able to do a lot of things at the company that really is shows what we're about. And so now the company itself, Sony itself, is now coming out and being very transparent and saying that this is part of what their company, not policies, but their company philosophy is. And so it's a very exciting place for me. I feel like you're on the beginnings of something that could change the world.
Thank you, Andra, and thank you for the amazing work you're doing. And we hope that you'll describe a little bit more what your ecosystem of operations are when we get a little deeper in here so we can understand that, the reverberating circles of your impact. Jen, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you. My name's Jen Boynton, and I've had a long career at different components of ES&G, starting in the nonprofit world. And then I was a journalist for many years covering corporate responsibility beat, the good actors and the bad actors. And about 5 years ago, I transitioned to the corporate side. We did some consulting for companies like Target and Mars, specifically on their ES&G and communications work. And then I found my love with ES&G reporting. I worked at Cisco for a couple of years running their ES&G report, their process. And now I'm with a company called Stryker, which is a medical device company. I hadn't heard of it before I got the job. And now that if you haven't heard of us, now you'll see the name anywhere. The company that makes hospitals, everything low-tech hospital beds and defibrillators and pulse oximeters, all the way up to hip and shoulder replacements and everything in between. And Stryker is pretty early in its ES&G reporting, or in its corporate responsibility journey. We're expanding fast, and I was brought in to help build out the ES&G reporting program. And the reason I'm really passionate about ES&G reporting specifically is that done properly, it's a framework for a company's entire responsible practice. You've got the governance to make sure that the company is operating responsibly, the environmental and the social, which includes community giving, philanthropy. And the report itself is a way to track progress, set goals, and then make that really easy for everyone outside of the company to find. So it's something I'm really passionate about. It's a growing field, changing rapidly, really interesting and exciting, and I'm just thrilled to be able to talk about it with you all today.
So I'm going to steal a Rachel Maddow and ask you, Jen, did I get anything wrong in my intro?
No, I think the thing about this, you did a great job. It's a long and winding path, and I think what's happening right now is that it is changing really rapidly. It always has, and it is right now. We're having new requirements from the SEC. Is going to be requiring companies to disclose on climate change. There's new EU regulations that are coming. So in many cases, the change is that it used to be something that like the sustainability people cared about, but maybe not the whole company. And now investor relations is caring about it. Finance, it's really caught the attention of people across the whole organization. So that's the latest, the only part that I would add.
Okay, good. All right. So that gets us going in the sort of start in a more of a holistic view, and then bring it down to your companies. And then I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on translating the message to your employees, and you can draw on your other stakeholders, because we want to give everyone in the room some tips that they can go away with in terms of their own communications and their own efforts to tell their various ecosystems and their stakeholders what they're doing with these, because they can be complicated to tell the story. And so I think that we want to make sure that we get to that. Please be sure that you reach out and chat. Just a quick note to everyone in the room, please make sure you reach out to our wonderful volunteers who are here today in force to help with our chat room discussion as well, and let us know that you've got a particular question. So Jan, let's go back to you for a minute, because you started the ball rolling on what's going on with ESG right now. Can you just give us how you view the status of this reporting initiative right now?
Yeah, so like I said, there are government agencies that are requiring reporting in a way that hasn't been done before. There's increasing interest from investors, which you spoke to. That's the whole ESG impact investing part. They want to know what's happening. They use the reporting to understand the quality of a company's CSR program. And so I would say that right now we're in a moment of tremendous engagement inflection, and like a holy heck moment, we have to do something about climate change moment. So it feels frothy is the only word that I can say to describe it. Everybody's hiring, everyone's looking to expand their program. So it's an interesting time in the field.
I would agree that we are in a decade of action, which is the theme of our 10th anniversary summit, which we will give you a link to in just a few minutes so that you can become involved. And Andra, what do you see as the challenges and the opportunities? You touched on some of that in terms of Sony and PlayStation in particular. Can you broaden that out a little bit and see what you think are some of the opportunities and challenges ahead for ESG?
I think the first thought that comes to me about challenges is trying to explain to people what it is, because it's such a broad subject that it's hard for me anyway to find the words. It overarches everything that the company does. What we've found, it touches our products, it touches our manufacturing process, it touches our sites, it touches our marketing, it touches our communications, it touches everything that we do. And so it's hard to for me, it was really hard to put all the pieces together. That's the biggest challenge for me. And I think explaining that to other people to help them understand and work towards the goals that we have. I think the opportunities are amazing because I feel that the corporations are the ones who might save the planet. I think they're the ones who really are pushing the things that will make the difference. I think that governments now don't really have all the necessary tools to do it, and they need the extra support. And I think corporations and their employees and like for PlayStation, their millions of users, we have an opportunity to start changing the world one person at a time.
So Jen, we've already got a question, maybe a couple of questions on how do you make the selection of the reporting platform that you're going to use? And I would also add that, how do you choose which of the E, the S, or the G is the primary focus? So that's kind of two questions. Are you ready?
Those are great questions. I'll start with frameworks. The leading frameworks right now are SASB and GRI and TCFD for climate. Those are the ones that investors are talking about, specifically SASB and TCFD. GRI is, they just released their most recent standard. It's 750 pages long, and so it's like difficult to get into as a new reporter, and it's very popular in Europe. So it's kind of a have to have if you have operations in Europe. The new EU standard is going to be based on the GRI standard, but SASB is much more approachable. The SASB standard is they have a different standard for every industry, and they tell you the 15 or 20 things they want you to report on, what are called the material topics, the topics that are most important for your industry, and they give you a specific list of which metrics they want you to focus on. So my recommendation for a new reporter, start with SASB and look and see what they're asking for. And beginning your journey with your reporting, it might start with data collection. And in some cases, even at Stryker, that's where we are. We're finding the people who own the data, getting them to start reporting it in the particular way. Then once you report it, and I saw a great question about how reporting translates to action come through the chat. The way that it comes through is you collect the data, you report it consistently, and then you know where you are and you can set goals against it. So you have to pair it with a strong commitment to internal improvement, that you use that data that you're sharing to set goals and set progress. And can you remind me what the second part of the question was?
The focus of, so I think you kind of just answered it because you said that there are material criteria per industry. So that would be a way of framing how you approach it. I was curious. I mean, those three buckets are large and hold a lot of, and if you trickle that down to all of the different organizations in terms of the data collection, and then you funnel it back up, clarify it, clean it up, report it, and then you hand it over to marketing and ask them to do communications, that's a huge lift for any corporation. So where do you start in terms of, do you start with these material criteria and make sure you're hitting the mark and use that as your forcing factor?
Yeah, I think there are different ways to approach it. That is a great one, to start with what's being asked. Another is if you're getting investor inquiries on a particular topic and that creates an urgency, there's some kind of other urgency in the company that's driving your reporting, you can start there. pretty much every company needs to be paying attention to their climate, their carbon emissions right now. So that's kind of a driver for many companies who are new to this right now. And beyond that, it's so intimidating to get in. I truly think that if you start with what's easy, with the data that you already have available, and build from there, then you're off to a good start. To combining that with looking at the topics that are material for your company.
So, Andrew, I know that the ESG, and it's very exciting to hear that Sony is solidifying into a real, into a clarified vision around this and department, and putting a lot of resources behind it therein, right? Mm-hmm. That will influence a lot of other companies because of the position of the company. But sustainability has been something that you've been doing for a long time. How have you focused on what's important, and what do you think, what parts of those do you think will move into the ESG reporting format?
Well, I think a lot of it will. I mean, we started with, of course, diversion rates, trying to get our recycling rates up. We've gone from that to no plastic, no single-use plastic at any of our locations. We started small. We started with things we could do, things we could teach the employees to do, and we just kept moving along one piece at a time. We went from there to renewable energy, and now we're moving into carbon emissions, tracking those and trying to get to zero carbon emissions. We take it, like I say, just one step at a time and do the best we can. The reporting is the most tedious thing that I have been involved in, because where I was just working on it now, because we're trying to combine our global offices and into one report. So it's pretty interesting trying to take all the rules and requirements from all over the world and put it into one place and see if we're managing to those.
Jen, any ideas for Andra?
So Stryker's early in our journey as well, and for me, I approach it as a behavior change challenge and an employee engagement challenge, because you're collecting the data, but really you're collecting your ESG reporting advocates who are going to be collecting the data for you. And if you've got people on the ground who own that data and they become passionate, and you can engage them and get them passionate about the reporting, they'll help you with the collection and help you make it a little bit easier. So it's a awareness building and behavior change challenge at the beginning. Can be tedious though too, not gonna lie there.
Yeah.
And isn't that then an opportunity to go back and then engage those same employees and their departments and their business units with the overall results? I mean, you've got to close the loop then to show them the story that data is telling, right? And the opportunity that's opening up. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. The report, it allows the whole company with all these different ESG disparate parts, everyone working on their own little area, to move as one organization, move in the same direction. And then if you're using that vehicle to share your goals and then submit report progress against your goals, then that's a reporting back mechanism. It makes everybody engaged in one effort, and it gets everyone moving in the same direction.
So, Andrew, when we talked before, you told me this wonderful story about an employee kind of sort of on the communication side, and how you turned that around. Could you tell us a little bit about that specific example?
Sure. So after I came back from Climate Reality and was very like I say, it changed my life. And I became very passionate about sustainability and climate change and things when I did. I was doing climate presentations all over the company for all the corporate executives and doing them everywhere. And one day I was doing one in our cafeteria, and people would come up to me and I'd do a presentation for them. This one gentleman came up to me and said, I just can't even look at that. It's all too depressing. It's just way too much for me. I don't even want to think about it. I know it's bad. I don't want to do anything about it. So I talked to him for a while, and I frankly don't remember exactly what I said to him, but for me, it's exciting because I see that as a challenge for us to fix, that we can do this, we can make it better. And as you see, as all the companies come together, we can all make it better. And so I talked to him about it for a little while, and that was it. And then a few days later, I was walking through the cafe, and same person comes up to him, gives me a hug, and told me that I had totally changed his opinions and thoughts. And he was really, he really was studying it now and understanding it, and he was really taking action. So that was really emotional to me, and that was a great moment to feel like, all the times that you've talked to people and they don't believe you or whatever, that made my day.
Well, I think that's a wonderful example about how this discipline within the companies to gather and synthesize and report and be, judged, basically scored on these criteria, can then be translated to communications and storytelling. So before I want to come back to that, but before we go there, I'm curious, Jen, do you think Europe is ahead of us in terms of standardizing? In the solar industry, they were way ahead of us in terms of getting sites up and running and figuring out, doing the initial really hard work. Now, not that we have it in the US, but there you go. So are they ahead of us? Is that standardization happening? And what do you predict that will mean for the US companies?
Yes, and yes. They're way ahead of us on the energy, the clean energy standards. And the EU has for the last decade or so, has had a commitment to carbon reductions and a plan for addressing climate change. And there's regulation around single-use plastics. This is not my area of expertise, so if other people on the call know more, you should listen to what they have to say as well. But you should listen to what they have to say instead of me. But they are pretty far ahead of us in many cases. And this EU, the reporting regulation is going to be for ESG reporting, and it's going to be for companies all over a certain size, which is quite small. So we're miles away from having any type of government requirement that you report. Ours is all coming through the investor. The SEC is part of the government, but it's specifically an investor tool that is being coming into compliance in the US, whereas in the EU, it's more of a sweeping good business regulation. And how that's going to affect us. So many companies are global at this point that it pulls along companies that wouldn't necessarily have another reason to engage on it.
Yeah, Glenn, I'd like to say something else about communication. Sure. With regard to PlayStation, we are working with the United Nations on working with something called Gaming for the Planet. And so we went out to all of our game developers. So when we have a game that the just regular Joe can create a game, and we asked them to create games that are about the planet and climate change. And I think we got 100 submissions for this year that we're taking to COP26. So when you start getting it into the mainstream and you get it to where the children are playing games to save the planet, for me, I understand it's about the corporations and the investors, but for me, it's always been more personal than that. And so my goal has always been to get it to the masses and have them, keep pushing it out, sort of kind of keep giving it back to the next. And I think if you start engaging young people and they start making this their focus, it is going to make a huge change. And our company has even tied the executives' bonuses to how well they perform into ESG. So that makes it very important to everyone at the company to pay attention.
Well, speaking of the UN, if you have not seen the new dinosaur talking video from the UN, you've got to see it. I see shaking heads here. Kathy over there at Shoals, shaking her head. If someone could put the link into the video, that would be great. The dinosaur is talking to the UN and telling them, don't choose extinction. It's fabulous storytelling. So I wish that we weren't at this point, but I agree with Andra that it is a decade of action and opportunity, which means that if you have any inkling and you want to be an ESG and you can get yourself trained, you could probably find a job very quickly because there's going to be a lot of work for that. Okay, so I want to go back to communications a little bit in term and how and harvesting up the supply chain. the standards 1, 2, and 3. There's a Carolyn, if you could find maybe the question about this, but let's address, because both of you have extensive supply chain partners, and you have to harvest up their data and put it into your systems, correct? How do you?
Right now we're not doing scope 3.
Okay, so
we're not there yet.
All right, so talk a little bit about how that's happening, or how it's envisioned to happen, and what do you see in terms of the opportunities there and maybe the challenges, if you want to speak to that. Jen, you want to kick us off there?
Sure. I will say that's a place where you can't do it all yourself, and being a ESG professional more on the communications side and behavior change side, I don't do much of the direct data collection. Stryker, I know even internally we have an external agency that helps us collect, because we do have a global we have a global presence and dozens of manufacturing sites, and so we use an external agency. I think it's Snyder that we're using, Snyder Electric, to help us track and monitor and measure. So that for me is a place where you pull in external experts.
Okay, Andra?
Well, I haven't gotten into that part yet, but I imagine that that's probably why on our ESG committee, they have the head of hardware engineering and operations who handles all the manufacturing.
All right, so maybe Jen, you could, because I bet you there's folks on the call today who are looking at a career in ESG. What does that look like from your point of view? What do you do on a day-to-day basis, and what excites you about this?
Yes, well, I do a lot of informational interviews because I'm really passionate about bringing people into the field. So I say, welcome, come join it. It's a phenomenal field. It's really exciting and interesting, and rewards people who are independent and comfortable taking on a challenge, doing work that hasn't been done before. So it's an interesting field. And my day-to-day life is a lot of meetings, a lot of PowerPoint presentations. That's where the behavior change piece gets in, a lot of internal education about what we're doing, and then a lot of goal setting conversations and like framework, programmatic framework, strategy work, which is kind of abstract, and that's with my core team. So a few different things, and but there's a place in the field for any type of skill set. If you have those quantitative skills, those are badly needed for more on the data collection and management side, on the communication side, writing and speaking and presenting about these things. There's room for all skill sets.
And Andra, how do you envision this? I know that you're in process here. What do you think? How are you seeing your new role?
I think my new role will be educational to the employees. I think it will be working across all of our different divisions to come up with global projects. We actually started on one yesterday, a renewable energy project overall, and bringing our different entities into the mix as one Sony. I see it as being a community outreach. So I think, as Jen said, it's a little bit of everything, and it's something that's so new that I'm bringing one employee with me that works with me now has no idea what he's going to do, and I can't really tell him because it's just so new to us that we're kind of figuring it out as we go along. But that's what's exciting, and to me, the other thing that's exciting is someday you'll look back on this and see that you were part of the change, and that is what makes the difference to me. I don't care what we have to do, as long as we can make a change.
Excellent. All right, so I promised Carolyn, who is handling the chat, that I wouldn't just ask all my questions. So, Carolyn, if you would like to pole vault us into some chat questions, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we've had some awesome contributions from the audience. Thank you all for doing that. And so I wanted to ask Annalise if she wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, question. So originally probably for Andra, but Jen has experience with this as well. But having both started newer programs or working on newer programs within large companies that haven't had this framework before, do you have any advice for those of us who might be looking to build programs at our companies and kind of what that process looks like, how you got buy-in from leadership, et cetera?
That's a tough one. I just kept talking to everybody. I mean, I just kept talking and talking and talking to anybody I could. And I finally had the opportunity to talk to the deputy president. So, and it was the right timing. When we talked to him, he said, that's very interesting because we were just talking about this at the global meeting in Tokyo. And so it went from there and it turned into this huge thing. So I think it's just a lot of advertising, I guess, or just talking to people. I think that most individuals themselves are very interested and very passionate about this. And so I think it relates all the way up to the top of the company.
Jen?
Yeah, I agree with everything Audra said. I do a lot of just talking to people. That means starting with your friendlies, people who have a natural affinity for this, as Audra said, in your personal life, and converting them and getting them to work on these issues with you. And then the other thing is that I will say, as you're working to convert hearts and minds, is that there are so many corporate benefits for a strong ESG program that you can pick and choose what data you're sharing to convince people. So if it's a finance person, you can talk about the rise in impact investing. If it's a risk person, you can talk about the risk of inaction or the exposure. Government affairs, we can talk about the fact that that companies are being asked to take a public opinion on these things where they never have before. So there are ways to figure out who you're trying to convert and then connect with them. And then finally, I'll say that what's been really effective for us at Stryker is we started with a steering committee that is people from all across the organization. And I can't take credit for producing that. My boss did, but she started basically with the highest level advocates she could find in every department and brought them together for a monthly meeting. And having that network was an instant outreach across the organization in the way that we wouldn't have had if we were just sitting in our own little silo. Sounds like Audra's got
I think that's true. Because our steering committee includes the president and CEO, and then it's the heads of every other division. And so that's, I think, is going to make the difference.
Makes a huge difference.
Excellent. And I want to just see if Amanda Pinion will come on for a minute, because she helped put this together. And she also is in the ESG sector, I understand. So maybe, Amanda, you could add a little bit of perspective on your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jen and I actually worked together on my first ESG reporting initiative at Cisco. And since then, I've actually moved into consulting. So I work with Anthesis and I help corporations, small companies realize what they should be doing for ESG reporting, and just making sure that they're building transparency, driving accountability, sharing with their investors and their stakeholders what initiatives that they have, which again, we're talking about the feedback loop and the circular mechanism that we have for reporting, and then driving the change internally within the business into the DNA. And really just, it's nice to see a lot of light bulb moments happening of, realization that certain existing programs actually have sustainability initiatives. They just don't quite know it yet. So there is a lot of information that already exists with companies, especially that they're just starting with their ESG reporting journeys. And like Jen had mentioned, start small, start with the information that you already have, and then figure out the areas that there are gaps, what your peers, competitors are doing, and then figure out how to grow. It's a really nice kind of, like I mentioned, it's a light bulb moment, especially for newer organizations, to get all that information together, come up with a cultural story of why sustainability and ESG matters to your organization. And then it's a year-over-year process of how do we continue to build and expand. So yeah, it's an exciting space. A lot of people are starting to realize the importance. It's not a nice to have, it's moving into a need to have. So someone put it so perfectly, it's easier to bake the chocolate chip cookies with the chocolate chips already in them rather than trying to put the chocolate chips in afterwards. So it's one of those things where the earlier you can get started, the better off you are in the long term.
Well, and Jen made a comment earlier about how this can really drive action within the overall organization. And I don't know of action that needs to be more driven than climate and diversity and social issues and corporate governance. I mean, these are fundamental to what needs to happen in the next few years so that we can really avert true climate catastrophe, not just solve climate change. You know, first we've got to avert the going over the cliff. So I really think that all of these insights are really important, and this work is important. I see a question about data work. Andrea and Jen, would you like to respond about what you see as maybe other opportunities in the industry to do the data crunching? Where would one go if wanted to be a data scientist or cruncher?
It looks like if they weren't interested. Is that just
if they isn't interested? Oh, perfect. What other kinds of jobs? Sorry.
We can do both. We can do both.
Perfect.
Well, I mean, I feel like my role is definitely not heavy on the data side because it's interpreting the data. It's not actually the collecting, it's the writing about it. And so much of the work is stakeholder engagement and behavior change. But outside of working, if the question is also working outside of corporate responsibility or kind of a corporate ESG function, there's the impact investing world, there is the NGO world, there are NGOs that work specifically with nonprofits. And as Sarah just pointed out, PR and marketing are crucial parts of ESG, and I see that communications lens is really crucial. So I think there are a ton of opportunities, whatever your skill set.
Yeah, I think that right now, for me at least, data crunching is part of it because we're at the beginning and we really have to understand where we are. But I think as it moves on and as we grow, there's going to be every type of job. A lot of it is going to be sort of being the advocate and going out and sort of, educating people and companies and providing information and getting people excited about doing all these things, because it's not just about crunching data, it's about working with the UN, and it's about working on diversity issues and working on social governance issues. And, there's just so many things that you could get involved in, so many different areas.
Well, and I see that is true of this whole topic as well, because we haven't touched on the whole investment part of it. How do investment groups look at this? How do retail investors look at this? The trillions and trillions of dollars that millennials and women actually as head of households are going to be judging their decisions of their investment dollars by these standards, and are companies doing what they're saying they're doing, or is it just greenwashing? I mean, I think that's a right conversation for 2022, but I invite you all to put in the chat if you'd like us as a community to address this topic again. And Carolyn, maybe we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I think Kathy had a really awesome one about how to frame this for a company who's already in clean energy or sustainability. So Kathy, would you want to expand on that question?
Yeah, sure. I work for a company that makes products for the solar industry. And so there's a perception that we're already good on ESG because that's all we do. We make products that support sustainability. And there's a certain amount of truth to that, but there's a lot more to ESG than just that. And I was wondering if any of the speakers could address that. Sort of how do you overcome a perception that we don't need to focus on ESG because we're already making products for sustainability?
I think that is you've exactly answered why Stryker is so late to ESG reporting. It's a company that makes medical devices, and there was this strongly held, and currently is long held belief that we make good products that are benefit for society, and this is something that we need to worry about. So the inflection point for this company was investor inquiries, and specifically around environment. So I think it's probably saying it might not matter now, but it probably will, and it's probably a good idea to start working on it now, because people will be asking. And in that industry, one thing I would start to be thinking about is that if you guys are supplying to, if you're B2B supplier, that businesses are under the hook to account for their supply chains, not just the emissions, the supply chain emissions, but what's happening in their supply chain, waste issues, conflict minerals, and that you guys could, there will come a time likely when you'll be responding to requests for proposals and be asked to account for more than just being a good company, the source of the products and things like that. So I think that's the way that I would start to approach it in that industry.
Excellent question, Kathy. Thank you. Andra, did you want to address
I have a couple thoughts on that. I think, as thinking about it from that perspective, I think as a company that's already doing good things because they're creating something that's sustainable already or helping, I think then you could go out and start looking at how can you help others with your product, how can you make your product better. Like, for instance, with Sony, where we have all these little R&D groups doing all different kinds of little projects. Like, one just created, they're creating fabrics. So fabrics for clothing, or fabrics to wrap our products in, things that we can do better with less environmental impact, or things you could do to help the world. Maybe you could take your solar products and start working with other parts of the world that are less fortunate, and doing, sort of philanthropical things.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I know that we're getting close to time to be wrapping up, but I see a colleague on the line, Nancy Edwards. Nancy, would you like to pop in and maybe give a some quick insights in the communication side of this of this discussion?
Sure. Hey, Glenna. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So I was just been texting a few people, but that Kathy's question is really germane, I think, within the solar industry, about how do we position this. And just within our company, I have a small marketing and communications firm, but we've actually been getting involved in sustainability consulting within the solar industry, because there is so much more interest, to Jen's point, in the supply chain reporting and in also just like the investor questions and things like that. So I think it's a really great time for communicators, because we are starting to have the data. And, to the point of this session, I really appreciate the fact that this is focused on reporting, because that is the hardest piece. And most of us have had to some degree, kind of figure it out as we go in terms of the communications piece. But with the data, you really have what you need in terms of the story. So I would just say, look at your data. Don't be afraid of the data. Look at the story that it tells, and stay very true to that. And that would be my comment.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I know we have more questions than we're going to be able to get to. Carolyn, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Alyssa Harley, do you want to ask your question about carbon offsetting versus other ways of becoming more sustainable?
Yeah, my name is Alyssa Harley. I also help co-organize the event, but I was wondering, many companies I see in terms of their carbon reduction strategies, a lot of it is mainly in buying offsets or just planting trees, rather than activities around what they're doing that reduces carbon. And I kind of asked this question because in terms of what my company does as a small company, our services are green. They would help reduce transportation related carbon, for example, but we see some companies, their strategy more in terms of buying an offset versus changing a behavior. I was wondering if you had any insight on that.
I had a discussion with one of my colleagues about that because I always felt that that was kind of cheating. You know, you should be doing the work yourself and not just buying out of it. But what was explained to me is that you can actually make a bigger impact by doing that. So for instance, if I at my company teach people how to do, I don't know, recycling or whatever, that's fine. I'm teaching, 1,000 people to do it. But if I could buy an offset for that and plant, 5,000 or 20,000 trees for that, or 20 acres of trees, I'm actually doing more good to do that at that moment. Not that we shouldn't do both, but sometimes it makes more sense to buy the offsets than it does to really do some of the work. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I was.
Jen?
Yeah, there are different schools of thought on it, but very strongly held opinions on both sides. I will say, I'll share that the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which asks companies to set strong carbon emissions commitments in order to have an approved target that is aligned to a 1.5 degrees of global warming. It has to be, in their school of thought, it has to be primarily internal reductions, renewable energy and energy efficiency. And then they allow you to offset the last 10%, I think, of your emissions, but they only want it to be emissions that are carbon removal, as meaning either direct capture from the air or planting trees. They won't let you use other types. So there's very strongly held opinions on both sides. And I was also talking to some friends who work for a carbon offset company, actually doing the projects and selling the offsets. Their demand is going crazy right now. Every company is trying to jump on the wagon, and they can't actually, it takes 5 or 10 years to get a project to the point of actually reduce it, actually online. So they can't, it's not a thing you can turn on or off either. They would argue, as Audra said, that if you can get the offsets, it's a much faster path to reaching your carbon commitments.
Well, I think we've identified a number of different topics that we could follow up on in 2022, including, I saw a question around B Corps, who are also doing ESG reporting, the topic that we just touched on, the topic of investment, the whole investment parameters. So I would invite you all to let us know if those topics or others are of interest to you. Sarah, I saw put out and our co-chair is here of the whole organization, Ms. Sarah Fuentes. Thank you, Sarah, for being here. So please give us your ideas. Also, if you're an expert, and I saw a number of chat posts that lead me to believe that we may have some experts here in the field. If you're an expert, please let us know. Can we bring up the slides? Because it looks like we need to be closing, ladies and gentlemen. I think that this is a hot topic that we could spend a whole afternoon on. But if we'll bring up the slides, we'll start to move you so we can close in time. I want to thank Andra Anderson from PlayStation Sony and Jen Boynton from Stryker for their time. Thank you for preparing for today and for all the great work that you're doing in the industry. We really appreciate that. And please do, everyone, let us know if you've got expertise that you would like to share, and we'll see what we can do about getting something going here. I mentioned our 10th anniversary summit coming up. It's on November 10th. We have an amazing roster of executives who are speaking. There's 3 different buckets: executives who are speaking, a youth panel that is very exciting. We actually have a keynote from Microsoft head of US sustainability. Don James is going to be here with us. Microsoft is actually our champion sponsor for the event. And then we're going to do an ideathon where you as our community are going to help us source ideas and initiatives for the next decade of action and WCS's role to impact the climate change. So please join us on November 10th. November 9th, we're going to look at environmental justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion panel. And in January, look, we're already talking about January, people. We're going to do a breaking into clean tech panel. I mean, it's just amazing. So next slide. Please do join us as a community. Our virtual membership is available to you. If you do it now, you get a discount on November 10th. Yes, you will. Right, Sarah? Sarah, chime in here. Tell us they'll get a discount. Perfect.
Yes, yes, indeed. The event's going to be amazing, everyone. And we just want to thank you so much for being here. And we're calling everybody on this call today to input. And this is the thing about WCS is that your opinion, your thoughts can actually live on forever. And in this ideathon, we're looking and sourcing ideas, and we want you to come and provide us with these thoughts that you may have around all these verticals in clean tech and sustainability. So thank you.
All right, excellent. And next slide. And we cannot do this without our amazing volunteer crew. So if you want to be a volunteer, contact Kirpa at volunteers@womenancleantechsustainability.org or use the handy little code there. And join us. 2022 is going to be a very fast-paced year, and I bet you we get to actually see faces for real. Although we are now in, I don't know, 13 countries. I don't know how many countries. We're in a bunch of countries. And so we will continue to have virtual calls because Zoom is here to stay, I think, ladies and gentlemen, it's here to stay. It's also more environmentally better. All right, next slide. And of course, we invite you to connect with us online and join our newsletter. And again, I can't say enough how important it is that we invite you to our 10th anniversary summit. So any parting thoughts? Miss Carolyn.
No, I think I am the co-chair of the events committee, and I just want to reiterate what Glenna's saying is like what we build our agenda is based on what you, our community, want. And so if you have any ideas of events that you really want, or if you want to volunteer and create the event yourself, like Alyssa and Amanda did, there are endless opportunities in that way. And thank you, Glenna, for being such an awesome moderator, and to our speakers.
Okay, so I'll send you my Venmo account so that I can pay you, for that nice compliment. Ladies and gentlemen, the ESG topic is a critical one. It can drive a lot of positive action, and we've just scraped the surface of this. And Jen and Andra, I really thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for helping us to understand this topic better. We obviously need to do more on that. And have a great day, everyone.